Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this Fox 10 You Decide election special. Tonight is part one of a two-part special where we will look at the top races and ballot measures affecting you. And we've got plenty to get to, including the race for Maricopa County Attorney. We'll introduce you to incumbent Rachel Mitchell and her opponent, Julie Gunnigal. We'll also meet the candidates vying to become Arizona's next Superintendent of Public Instruction, the incumbent Kathy Hoffman and the former state school superintendent, Tom Horn. But we begin tonight with the Secretary of State's race. In charge of overseeing Arizona's elections, it's a job that comes with a lot of scrutiny. It also happens to be the person second in line to become the governor. Fox 10's Marissa Sarbach sat down with both candidates to find out their plans that they want to bring to the position.
Arizona doesn't have a lieutenant governor, which means the Secretary of State is next in line should anything happen to the governor. It's an extremely crucial part of our state government, and this year the race has gotten more attention than ever before. Here are your candidates for Secretary of State: Mark Fincham and Adrian Fontes.
I have a commitment to make sure that every candidate, every individual who wants to be in the political process, that wants to run to represent their constituency, no matter what their political stripe is, that they have a fair chance to do so.
The elections are the golden thread that run through the fabric of our society. If you don't do elections well, that whole fabric disintegrates. So that's really the foundation of the republic. And for me, that's why it's such an important office, and that's why I chose to run for Secretary of State.
The most critical and visible job of the Arizona Secretary of State is to ensure safe and accurate elections in all 15 counties. Republican Mark Fincham, current member of the Arizona House of Representatives, has spent much of his campaign claiming election fraud in the 2020 presidential race.
Voter roll cleanup, that's huge. We've got to get people off the voter rolls who have either moved out of state, have deceased.
Democrat Adrian Fontes says his opponent's fears over election integrity are unfounded.
He only sees discrepancies and irregularities when Donald Trump loses. He doesn't see them when he wins, and he has won in all those races. 2
years ago, Fontes lost re-election for Maricopa County Recorder, in part because of problems during the 2018 primary under his watch. 62 polling locations didn't open on time. There were broken check-in machines, and printers ran out of ink. He says his team revamped the voting process in Maricopa County, effectively solving the problems.
We inherited a system that needed a revolution, and from the primary in 2018 to the general in 2018, we saw a marked improvement. And as a matter of fact, we haven't had any problems in Maricopa County since then.
His opponent remains skeptical.
One of the things that we'll be watching for is election irregularities, where poll watchers denied entry, where they deny the opportunity to observe.
Fincham has drawn criticism for campaigning against mail-in voting, claiming it's not secure. Yet records show he's voted almost exclusively by mail in the past. When mail-in ballots, early voting, and Election Day numbers are tabulated, we will have our new Secretary of State in Arizona. So we asked both candidates, what happens on November 9th?
If you win or you lose, do you feel like you can say with all certainty that that candidate was the person that Arizona picked?
As long as we can verify that everybody followed the law.
I'll pose that same question to you.
Yeah, I trust the people in Arizona who run our elections in all 15 counties.
Marissa Sarbach, Fox 10 News.
More than 2.5 million Arizona voters are expected to cast a ballot in this November's election. And while a majority of those will be early votes, plenty of voters will still head to the polls physically on November 8th, including here in Maricopa County. For anyone heading to more than 200 voting centers around Maricopa County on November 8th, County Recorder Stephen Richards says, have your ID ready.
When you get to the voting location, you're going to scan that. It's going to pull up your voter profile.
Poll workers can then print your appropriate ballot.
After you've filled it out, you will go and you will put it into the tabulation machine yourself, and it will say okay, and you'll say okay, and it will go down, and that will automatically be tabulated, and that will be stored on memory devices that will later then be later that night taken to our central facility here and loaded into our election management server.
For anyone who hasn't turned in their early ballot and wants a new one, poll workers have you covered.
You can bring your early ballot if you want to, if you've written something on it. You don't have to. As soon as you check in at a voting location, it will deactivate the code on your early ballot packet such that you couldn't send it back. That's how we prevent against double voting.
But he's reminding everyone that any early ballot dropped off at a polling location on Election Day will not be included in the first batch of results at 8 p.m.
We can't pick up those early ballot envelopes until after polls have closed on election day. We still have to image capture them. We have to scan them to scan the barcode to make sure that that only has one vote associated with the profile. Then we have to signature verify it. Then we have to send it to a bipartisan ballot processing team. And then only then can it come in here to our tabulation center to actually be tabulated. That doesn't happen within 2 hours.
We've got much more on tonight's Fox 10 election special. Coming up next, we preview the important race for Maricopa County Attorney between incumbent Rachel Mitchell and Julie Gunnigal. And later, we take a closer look at the 10 propositions on this year's ballot. It's lengthy, including one that aims to tackle dark money in political advertising. We're back in a moment. Welcome back. Voters in Maricopa County will decide on their next prosecutor. A special election became necessary after the resignation of the late Alistair Adele. This race pits a relative newcomer against the appointed county attorney, both with very different views on how to run the office and how to handle crime. Fox 10's Brian Webb has more.
I want to keep the community safe. That is my number one priority.
Interim County Attorney Rachel Mitchell has been at the prosecutor's office for 30 years now, but says she's taken drastic steps to chart a new course under her helm. From clearing a backlog of cases to cracking down on illegal guns and drugs, protecting against retail theft, plus pushing to keep criminals off the streets.
Basically catch and release mode that we've been in for the last few years that is causing smaller numbers of police to have to rearrest the same criminals over and over and over again. And so we are really pushing higher bail to keep these individuals in and off the streets.
On abortion, Mitchell says she would not prosecute a patient, but the jury's still out on doctors and nurses.
If a case even comes into my office, and again, I don't have any, we would review it just like we would review any other case. Let me ask just a few questions.
Mitchell played a major role at the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearing, questioning his sex assault accuser. She insists her job was not political.
If the Democrats had asked me to question her, I would have questioned her for the Democrats. It was the opportunity to ask her good questions in a research-backed manner.
How on earth do you backtrack from that and say that you stand with women after attacking Dr. Christine Blasey Ford on the national stage?
The other option is Julie Gunnigal, a former prosecutor in Illinois and Indiana. She comes with a firm stance on prosecuting abortions, not any time, not anyone.
I'm committed to keeping the county attorney's office out of people's private lives and doctors' offices.
Gunnigal believes the current county attorney's office is plagued by miscues and corruption and stuck in the Stone Age, over-sentencing criminals, overcrowding prisons. She says it's high time to prioritize things like treatment programs for mental health and addiction.
And what we would see is a big investment in our children, in our seniors. We would have so much more money and more resources toward the things that matter, while simultaneously keeping the community so much safer.
And Gunnigal, who lost a close race for the same spot in 2020, believes being a good county attorney is as much about the things you don't do as it is the things you do.
I'm going to keep you safe, I'm going to save you money, and I'm going to stay out of your bedroom and your doctor's offices.
Brian Webb, Fox 10 News.
The candidates also differ on the death penalty. Mitchell believes that for the worst crimes committed by the worst criminals, she supports the death penalty. Gunnigal has been a critic of the death penalty. Coming up after the break, we're going to look at the race to become Arizona's next superintendent of public instruction, pitting the incumbent, Kathy Hoffman, against the man who once held that job for 2 terms, Tom Horn. We're back in a minute. The race to be Arizona's next school superintendent features some familiar faces. Democrat incumbent Kathy Hoffman is a former preschool teacher who was elected as the state's top educator back in 2018. She's looking for a second term. Tom Horn has already served 2 terms in that job as superintendent of public instruction from 2003 to 2011. He's looking to get back in the job. Both candidates will have their work cut out for them trying to get Arizona students back on track following the pandemic. Recent data suggests Arizona students struggled during the pandemic. Test scores for subjects like English and math lagged behind the rest of the country.
Well, we clearly have our work cut out for us, and Arizona is following trends like the rest of the country, that the pandemic had a significant impact, a very negative impact on student learning. One of the biggest lessons we learned is that nothing replaces in-person learning.
Tom Horn believes it was Hoffman's failure to lead.
She's distracted with other things, critical race theory, social emotional learning, things that tend to sexualize our children, which I think shocks the people the most. But she's focused on those things, not on academics.
More than 1 million students attend public schools in Arizona with more than 60,000 teachers. But that's thousands short than what's needed. Arizona recently increased teacher salaries, but both candidates say it's not nearly enough.
You have to create an overall atmosphere, making sure the money goes in teacher salaries and not administration. I've been crusading against excessive administration for at least 20 years now. The money has to go to the salaries of teachers because we lose good teachers to surrounding states that have higher salaries. No school can be better than the quality of the teachers inside the classroom.
On the issue of Arizona's expansive school voucher program, each candidate had very different ideas on the impact it will have on public schools.
My concern is we're not asking the questions around how are we holding these schools accountable for the education they're delivering to children in the ESA voucher program. So while we're asking our public schools, districts and charters to show us how are your kids reading? Are your kids doing well in math? And we collect that data, and we're ensuring that their teachers are certified. We're really having these high standards for public schools. But for private schools that are receiving our public tax funds, our education funds, they are not required to do state assessments.
The important question is not the gross amount of money going to school, it's the amount of money per pupil.
Right.
So if a pupil decides to go someplace else, they lose the funding for that pupil, but they'll lose the expense of teaching that pupil.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
So if you look at dollars per pupil, it does not have a negative effect.
Still ahead, 10 Arizona propositions are on the ballot this year. Yeah, you've got a little work to do. It's not easy. Everything from in-state tuition for dreamers to property tax exemptions for disabled veterans. We run them down for you. Coming up next. Welcome back. You decide. There are 3 more propositions on this year's ballot, including an effort to add a position of lieutenant governor. We don't have one currently in Arizona. Proposition 131, if passed, would change that. It would amend the state constitution to create the new position. The lieutenant governor would run on the same ticket as the governor and be second in line. Voters have tried this twice before, but both measures failed. Proposition 308 involves in-state tuition and financial aid for kids who entered the country illegally but have completed high school. If approved, Arizona students would be eligible for financial aid regardless of their immigration status. And if they attended a public school or homeschooled for 2 years and graduate, they could be eligible for in-state tuition. Supporters believe this would make college more affordable for thousands of undocumented students. Opponents argue these benefits should only be made available for students in the country legally. Finally, Prop 309 would change the way Arizonans vote by mail and in person. If approved, you would be required to add your birth date and driver's license number to an early ballot. The last 4 of your Social Security would also work, the last 4 numbers. Right now, only a signature is required. For in-person voting, you would need to present a government-issued photo ID. Supporters say this would increase voting integrity. Opponents are concerned about privacy. Now, if you missed anything from tonight's show, don't worry. You can find more information about all the candidates and the propositions on this year's ballot. Go to our website. Just scan the QR code on your screen, or you go to fox10phoenix.com/election. It's a great resource, especially if you're still filling out your early ballot. And don't forget, Fox 10 is your election headquarters on November 8th. Our coverage begins at 8 o'clock that night, right here on Fox 10. Christina Carilla and I will have the very latest results at the top of the hour. And then we'll have live reports from both party headquarters with reaction from the winners and the losers on election night. Tonight's show was just part one of our Fox 10 election special. Next Sunday night, we'll focus on the biggest races in the upcoming election, including the race to be Arizona's next governor between former news anchor and Republican Kari Lake and current Secretary of State Democrat Katie Hobbs. We'll also take a look at the big Senate race between Democratic incumbent Mark Kelly and Republican newcomer Blake Masters. And we'll preview the Attorney General's race between Democrat Chris Mays and Republican Abe Hamadeh. It's all coming up next Sunday night for part two of our election special. That's going to do it for us. Have a great night. We will see you next Sunday night at 5:30.